The drilling platform at Citronen Fjord on the northern coast of Greenland sits 64 kilometers above the Arctic Circle, surrounded by an ice field that does not melt even in August. The temperature reads negative 11 degrees Celsius at noon. The wind off the Lincoln Sea moves at 20 knots steady. The platform is operating. The drill is turning. The cores are coming up. Not because of an American mining license. Not because of a Danish royal concession. Not because of a Greenlandic territorial permit issued through Nuuk. The platform is operating because of a joint development agreement signed 11 days earlier between the Government of Canada, the Government of Greenland, and the Kingdom of Denmark, granting Canadian mining and processing firms exclusive multi-decade rights to develop the largest zinc, rare earth, and uranium deposits on the island. The senior geologist on site, a Canadian woman named Annette, who has worked Arctic mineral exploration for 27 years across 4 continents, said something to a documentary film crew at the start of the day shift that no Western mining geologist has ever said on the record before. She said, "We are standing on what may be the most strategically valuable single piece of land in the Northern Hemisphere. And as of last week, it is not American. It will not be American. The Americans were offered the chair we are sitting in. They knocked it over on the way to the door. That is the sound of a $34 billion mistake. And it began with a single sentence shouted at a press gaggle on the south lawn of the White House. The setting was an unscheduled exchange with reporters as the president walked from the residence toward Marine One on a Thursday afternoon. A correspondent from a Copenhagen newspaper asked in carefully formal English about the recently concluded Canada-Greenland-Denmark trilateral framework, asking specifically how the administration intended to respond, given the president's repeated public statements over the previous 2 years about purchasing Greenland or bringing it under American strategic control. The president stopped walking. He turned toward the cameras. The answer veered off script almost immediately. Greenland, he said, Greenland was ours. Greenland was going to be ours. I had it locked down. Everybody knows it. The Danes knew it. The Greenlanders knew it. The whole world knew it. And then Carney sneaks in there behind my back like a thief in the night, and he signs some piece of paper with the Danes. And now he thinks he owns Greenland. He does not own Greenland. Nobody owns Greenland but the United States eventually, when we get it back. And we will get it back. By Tuesday. Mark my words, by Tuesday. He went further, and the second remark was sharper than the first. Carney is a thief. He is a thief. He stole Greenland. He stole it. From me, from the American people. He thinks he is clever. He is not clever. He is overrated. Greenland is overrated too, honestly. Lots of ice, some rocks. Who cares? We have plenty of rocks. We have plenty of ice. We do not need Greenland. We never needed Greenland. But we should have it anyway because it belongs to us. And Carney is a thief. The words were captured by every camera on the South Lawn. They aired live across European morning newscasts. They were translated into Danish, Greenlandic, Inuktitut, French, and German within 40 minutes. They were played in their entirety inside the Greenlandic Parliament building in Nuuk during a regular session that afternoon. The chamber went silent. A member of the legislature, an Inuit woman who had served 18 years in Greenlandic politics, stood from her seat, walked to the microphone, and said in her own language, "We are not anyone's to steal. We are not anyone's to buy. We are not overrated. We are home. Thief. Overrated. Belongs to us." These were not the words of careful Arctic diplomacy. They were the words of a man who had never set foot on Greenlandic soil, never met with a Greenlandic Premier, never read a single technical assessment of the mineral deposits at Kvanefjeld or Citronen Fjord or Kringlerne, never sat through a briefing on the difference between proven reserves and inferred reserves, never understood that the island his country had attempted to buy was not for sale because it was not, and had never been, anyone's to sell. They were the words of a man who had assumed, for 2 years, that the absence of a deal meant the deal was still available. And within 72 hours, the response came. Not 72 days, not 72 weeks, 72 hours. The response did not come from Carney. It came from a joint press conference held in Copenhagen, with the Danish Foreign Minister standing at the center podium, the Greenlandic Premier to her right, and the Canadian Minister of Natural Resources to her left. Carney was not in the room. He had been deliberately absent, having flown back to Ottawa the day before, specifically so that the announcement would be delivered by the three parties who had signed it in the order they had signed it. The Danish Foreign Minister spoke first, in English, and her voice was flatter than the Atlantic on a calm morning. She said, "The Kingdom of Denmark, the Government of Greenland, and the Government of Canada have entered into a 50-year trilateral framework covering the development, processing, and export of critical minerals from Greenlandic territory. The framework recognizes Greenlandic sovereignty over all mineral resources. It assigns processing rights to Canadian firms holding the technical capacity required. It provides Denmark with security guarantees, infrastructure financing, and revenue-sharing arrangements consistent with the realm. We have signed this agreement freely, voluntarily, after 18 months of negotiation, and after careful consideration of all available partners. Canada was chosen because Canada was the only Western nation with the technical refining capacity, the Arctic operational experience, the cold weather logistical infrastructure, and the diplomatic temperament required to be a 50-year partner. We have made our choice. The choice is final." She paused. She looked directly at the lead camera. She added the second line, the line that traveled around the world inside 90 minutes. She said, "Greenland is not a piece of real estate. Greenland is a nation within our kingdom. Calling its premier a tenant, calling its people overrated, calling its land something to be taken, these are not the words of a partner. They are the words from which we have, today, formally protected our friends in Nuuk." The Greenlandic Premier spoke next, in his own language, with a quiet voice that did not rise once during a 7-minute statement. He thanked the Canadian government for treating Greenland as a sovereign nation rather than as inventory. He thanked the Danish government for honoring the realm. He thanked the Inuit Circumpolar Council, the elders of Nuuk, Ilulissat, Sisimiut, and the small village of Kanok, where his grandmother had been born. He did not mention the United States. He did not mention the President. He did not need to. The Canadian minister spoke last. He said only 32 words. He said, "Canada is honored by the trust placed in us by the people of Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark. We accept this responsibility with the seriousness it deserves. We will be worthy of it." Within 72 hours, the replacement test for the American position began. It failed across 4 sectors simultaneously. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a major American specialty metals company that had spent 4 years lobbying for preferred access to Greenlandic rare earth deposits, projecting an expected supply of $700 million annually, learned that those deposits were now contracted to flow through a Canadian processing facility in Saguenay, Quebec, for export to European and Asian markets under the new framework. The chief executive of the Pittsburgh firm, a man named Gene who had spent 33 years inside American metallurgical industry, sat in his office and read the framework document twice. He canceled a planned $800 million capital investment in a Pennsylvania processing facility the following morning. The expansion would have employed an estimated 720 workers in the Pittsburgh metropolitan area. He told a regional industry publication, voice steady but tired, "We did not lose this on price. We did not lose this on quality. We lost this because the Greenlanders did not want us, and they did not want us because the man at the top of our country called them overrated on national television. I have spent 4 years building the relationships that were supposed to lead to this contract. Those relationships ended in a single afternoon. You cannot get them back." In Anchorage, Alaska, a logistics and shipping consortium that had invested $240 million over 6 years, building the cold weather port infrastructure required to handle projected Greenlandic mineral exports through American Arctic shipping lanes, discovered that the trilateral framework routed all Greenlandic mineral exports through the port of Halifax in Nova Scotia, with secondary processing in Quebec, and onward shipment under Canadian and European flagged carriers. The consortium's chief operating officer, a 4th-generation Alaskan named Daniel, whose great-grandfather had been a gold miner outside Fairbanks, stood in front of his board at a hastily convened emergency meeting. He told them that the port expansion they had built was now serving traffic that would never arrive. He told them the projected revenue had not been delayed. It had been redirected to Halifax, permanently. He told them he had personally flown to Nuuk 3 times in the preceding 2 years to build the trust the consortium had needed. He told them that the last meeting had ended cordially. He told them that within 48 hours of the president's South Lawn remarks, his Greenlandic counterpart had sent a 1-sentence email that read, "I am sorry." The board canceled the second phase of the port expansion. 1,100 Alaskan jobs were lost. In Houston, Texas, a major American oil services and Arctic drilling contractor that had positioned itself for 15 years to be the primary American partner in any Greenlandic offshore development, discovered that the trilateral framework excluded American firms from preferred bidder status entirely, restricting all Arctic offshore work to Canadian, Norwegian, and Danish operators under the new framework. The chief executive flew to Copenhagen the following Monday to request a meeting with the Danish Foreign Minister. He was politely informed that no meeting was available that week or the following week, or for the foreseeable future. He returned to Houston on Thursday afternoon. He canceled a planned $320 million Arctic equipment manufacturing investment in Texas. The plant would have employed 540 workers. In Buffalo, New York, an American specialty metals refining firm that had been negotiating for 2 years to license Canadian rare earth separation technology learned that the license terms had been revised, effective immediately, under the new trilateral framework. The revised terms required that any American licensee using the technology had to demonstrate that its end-use applications were not subject to American government export restrictions toward Canadian or European partners. The American firm could not meet the requirement. The license negotiation ended that afternoon. The firm's chief technical officer, a metallurgist named Marie with 24 years of experience in rare earth separation chemistry, told an industry publication, "We did not lose this because the Canadians were difficult. We lost this because we are American, and being American now comes with conditions attached. I have spent my career building bridges across the border that has been here all my life. I am watching those bridges close, lane by lane, because of words that nobody in my industry asked anyone to say. The numbers spread quickly. The framework was deeper and more strategically engineered than the initial press conference had revealed. Greenland holds proven and inferred reserves of rare earth elements estimated at over 38 million tons, the second largest known deposit outside of China. Greenland holds the largest known undeveloped uranium deposit in the Western Hemisphere. Greenland holds significant reserves of zinc, lead, copper, gold, nickel, cobalt, lithium, and graphite. Greenland sits astride the Northwest Passage, the shipping corridor whose strategic significance has multiplied every year as Arctic ice has receded. Greenland controls air corridors and undersea cable routes between North America and Europe. Greenland hosts a major United States military installation at Pittsburgh, which the trilateral framework explicitly preserved, but which now operates under conditions in which the host nation has formally aligned its critical mineral exports, its Arctic infrastructure development, and its long-term economic future with Canada and the Kingdom of Denmark. This is not a temporary fluctuation. This is a structural realignment of Arctic sovereignty. It has been building for 10 years, ever since Greenlandic governments began quietly seeking partners who would treat the island as a nation rather than as a parcel. The original outreach to Canada began in 2015, conducted through informal channels between Inuit communities on both sides of the Davis Strait. The first formal exploratory conversations between Ottawa and Nuuk began in 2019. The first technical assessments of Canadian refining capacity began in 2021. The framework was drafted in 2024. It was reviewed, negotiated, and pre-cleared over the past 18 months. It was held, sitting in a folder marked only with a date field, waiting for the political moment that would justify its public release. The political moment was provided by the South Lawn. The folder opened. Then came the human stories. In Nuuk, the capital of Greenland, a teacher named Steph had spent 22 years teaching Inuktun language and Greenlandic history at a high school overlooking the harbor. Her grandmother had been a seal hunter. Her father had been a fisherman. Her son worked on a Canadian mineral exploration crew at Citronen Fjord. On the morning the framework was announced, the school principal asked her to address the senior class about what the news meant. She stood in front of 47 students. She did not use her teacher's voice. She told them, in their own language, that for the first time in their lives, the world had recognized that Greenland was a country, not a colony, not a purchase, not a real estate transaction, a country. She told them that the Canadians had come to Nuuk 3 times before signing, that the Canadians had eaten dinner in the homes of elders in Sisimiut, that the Canadians had asked permission instead of demanding it. She told them that an American president had called their home overrated on television. She told them that the answer to being called overrated was not to be angry. The answer was to be chosen. And today, she said, you were chosen. A student in the back row, a 16-year-old boy whose mother worked on a Danish supply ship, asked her if Greenland would now become part of Canada. She shook her head. She told him, we will become more of ourselves. That is what this means. We will become more of ourselves. In Saguenay, Quebec, a refinery operator named Pierre had spent 19 years working the night shift at an aluminum and rare earth processing facility. He had been laid off twice during downturns. He had been called back twice. He had a wife and 2 daughters and a small house outside the city with a garden his wife had planted with her mother's vegetables. On the morning the framework was announced, the facility's general manager addressed the entire workforce in the cafeteria at 7 in the morning. He told them that the plant was being expanded to handle the Greenlandic rare earth concentrates that would begin arriving by ship at the port of Sept-Îles within 18 months. He told them that 410 new positions would be created over the next 30 months. He told them that the work they had been doing for 2 decades, quietly, in the cold, on rotating shifts, far from any camera, had just become the most strategically significant industrial output in the Western Hemisphere. Pierre told a Radio Canada reporter that evening in French, with his lunch pail still in his hand, I have never been called important in my life. I do not need to be called important. I need my work to count. The man in Washington said our work did not count. He said we were overrated. Today, the world said we were the only ones who could do this work. I do not need to be famous. I need my daughters to know that what I do matters. Today, they know. The political fractures inside the United States arrived from the direction the administration had not expected. They came from the Arctic itself. The governor of Alaska, a Republican who had endorsed the administration in 3 consecutive election cycles, sent a letter to the White House that bypassed normal diplomatic channels and was released to the press the same afternoon. The letter read, My state has invested over $500 million in Arctic infrastructure on the assumption that the United States would maintain a constructive relationship with Greenland. Your remarks have eliminated that assumption. The trilateral framework signed in Copenhagen has redirected mineral, shipping, and processing flows that my state was positioned to handle. The economic impact on Alaska will exceed $2 billion over the next decade. I did not endorse calling Greenland overrated. I did not endorse calling Premier Egede a tenant. I did not endorse calling Prime Minister Carney a thief. These remarks have cost my state real jobs, real investment, and real future opportunity. I'm asking you, directly and publicly, to restore the relationships that have been broken. 3 major American defense industry associations issued a joint statement within 5 days, warning that the framework altered the strategic calculus of Arctic security in ways that would require fundamental revision of American Arctic doctrine. The statement read, The Arctic is no longer a region in which the United States holds default influence. It is a region in which the United States must now compete for influence with partners who have chosen, freely and after long deliberation, to align with Canada and the Kingdom of Denmark. This realignment is not the result of foreign hostility. It is the result of our own conduct. Skill is not defined by a passport. Trust is not measured in slogans. Friendship has a limit. The cost estimates climbed for 3 straight weeks. A coalition of American industry analysts projected that the lost American access to Greenlandic minerals, Arctic infrastructure, and processing partnerships would cost the American economy approximately $34 billion in foregone development, redirected supply chains, canceled domestic expansions, and lost defense industrial opportunities over the next decade. $34 billion because a man called another man a thief. $34 billion because a continent's worth of ice and rock had been described on a Thursday afternoon on a White House lawn as overrated. Beyond the dollar figures, something had shifted that did not appear on any spreadsheet. The South Lawn remarks had completed something the previous 18 months had begun. They had taught the Arctic that the United States could no longer be relied upon to treat its smaller northern partners as equals. They had taught Nuuk and Copenhagen and Reykjavik and Tromsø and Helsinki and every Inuit community from Inuvik to Iqaluit to Tasiilaq that there was now an alternative. The alternative was Canada. The alternative was not loud. The alternative did not call anyone overrated. The alternative had spent a decade quietly listening, quietly investing, quietly building the refining capacity, the shipping capacity, the diplomatic temperament, and the cold weather operational experience that the Arctic actually required. The president said Greenland was overrated. The trilateral framework was signed by parties who knew exactly what Greenland was worth. The president said Carney was a thief. The framework had been drafted, negotiated, and signed in open meetings across 3 capitals over 18 months, with full ministerial signatures and ratified by 3 sovereign governments. The president said America would get Greenland back by Tuesday. By Tuesday, Greenland's mineral wealth was flowing under Canadian and Danish names, with Greenlandic sovereignty written into every paragraph of the agreement. He tried to make Greenland small. Greenland became continental. He tried to make Carney a thief. The world watched a quiet ceremony in Copenhagen in which nothing had been stolen because everything had been chosen. He tried to humiliate 3 nations in a single afternoon on a White House lawn. The humiliation traveled in the opposite direction, paid in canceled port expansions in Anchorage, canceled refining investments in Pittsburgh, canceled Arctic manufacturing in Houston, canceled licenses in Buffalo, and a $34 billion invoice that would grow year by year, while a drilling platform on the northern coast of Greenland continued to turn, in -11 degrees, under a Canadian flag and a Greenlandic flag and a Danish flag, with no American flag anywhere in sight. Please hit the bell icon and subscribe my channel for daily updates.